Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, next bill, Legislative Bill 143, offered by Senator Conrad and others. It's a bill for an act relating to time to provide for year-round daylight savings time as prescribed, to harmonize provisions and repeal the original section. Bill was introduced last year on January 6th. It was referred to the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. That committee reports the bill to general file with no committee amendments.
Senator Conrad, you are welcome to open on LB 143.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, good morning, colleagues. So this is perhaps Exhibit B for me in the 2024 legislative session about why it's a good idea to support Senator Briese's bills. So after Senator Briese, of course, was appointed and selected to become the state treasurer, a host of different senators in the body have picked up the legislation that he had previously introduced to carry it forward. So in addition to LB 16, which we took up together earlier this session, I also have been assigned to pick up LB 143, which is a complete delight, because much like the legislation that Senator Briese put forward in regards to LB 16, when it comes to LB 143, I and many of you were a swift and proud co-sponsor of this important legislation. So, and in addition to property taxes, maybe this is one of the areas that people best knew Senator Briese for his work as a member of this body, but trying to bring some clarity and some change that is long overdue to our current system of daylight savings time and turning those clocks forward and back multiple times a year, which provides a lot of consternation for a lot of Nebraskans and a lot of Americans from different perspectives, whether that be safety, whether that be health, whether that be economic. And there are also important issues contained herein regarding energy conservation. And finally, one thing that really truly spoke to me when Senator Briese first started working on this issue and continued his work on it was, as a mom of two young kids, I had always, of course, as a young person and single adult, you know, kind of managed to work through the different time periods where we had changed our clocks each year, maybe grumbled a little bit in one direction or another, but was able to manage it fairly well, like each of us. But once I had little ones, that management became a lot more challenging. I know a lot of the people with little ones, with young children in the room, are shaking their heads, are smiling, are nodding, and those following at home probably the same. You work so hard to get those little ones on a good schedule when it comes to sleep, when it comes to nap, when it comes to daily activities for their health and managing your family's daily rhythms. And these two opportunities a year where we change our clocks either forward or back really wreak havoc on their little systems and those family rhythms during the day. So this issue took on much more importance to me, having worked through those issues with two little ones at home. So that being said, Mr. Speaker and members, LB 143 is a bill to implement year-round daylight savings time in Nebraska. Again, want to thank Senator Tom Briese for his good work on this. So, colleagues, you may have seen some of the headlines that I have seen when I've had an opportunity to look at this issue. Consistently in poll after poll on the national level, well north of over 60% of Americans want to see a change to how we conduct daylight savings time and how we turn our clocks forward or back twice a year. Some of those polls even reach over 70% and span across the country and across the political spectrum and other demographics. That's why you've started to see really a flurry of activity in the states and on the federal level to re-examine this process. So the Sunshine Protection Act, in fact, did pass the Senate very recently to make daylight savings time permanent. However, it languished in the House and did not move forward. Nevertheless, over the last 5 years, 19 of our sister states have joined the movement to address these practices. And there have been, in addition to 19 states that have moved in this direction through legislative bill or resolution, over 550 bills introduced at the state level to try and address these practices. So a lot of states have been grappling with these issues and are trying to bring some change to an issue that disrupts our lives and our circadian rhythms and our economy and our health. And I am hoping that Nebraska will finally join with our sister states to make these changes. Just from a kind of legal framework perspective, I want to be clear about a couple of other things. People, I think, generally know that our sister states in Hawaii and Arizona, and then many U.S. territories, don't observe daylight savings time, but instead have opted to be on standard time year-round. And this is important to note, not only as a well-known example, but it helps to illustrate the legal framework for the federal law as it stands today. Any state can make a decision to operate on standard time for the entirety of the year and to end the practice of fall back, spring ahead that we go through each fall and each spring. And that's what our sister states in Hawaii and Arizona have done for some time. However, if a state chooses to try and have daylight savings time be the permanent standard that we select in terms of our operation, that there is a framework in place under federal law to do so. And that is what our 19 other sister states have elected to do in regards to joining this movement and asking for the federal government to make changes and then providing some contingencies on that federal change and the resolution and commitment of adjacent sister states to move in that direction on not only a state level, but a regional level as part of that national change. I've talked to many members who are interested in this bill, and I want to be as candid as I can be. I am personally not married to how we go about making this change. I see the clear benefits in the research and otherwise of staying on standard time year-round. I understand there are competing interests in moving to daylight savings time on a permanent basis. I know my friend Senator Erdman has a floor amendment to adjust the approach that's present in LB 143 as it stands. And again, I personally am not committed to only one way to go about this. I want to address the issue, and I want to stop changing our clocks in the fall and the spring just to make it a little bit more manageable and a little bit better for the disruption that currently impacts our daily life rhythms, our circadian rhythms, and that has adverse consequences with these disruptive time changes, not only for health issues and safety issues and parenting issues, but that literally has clear and demonstrated research out there in regards to safety issues as well. So I think this is going to be a really exciting debate. I see there's a very full queue. I'm happy to answer any questions and excited to see what path the body decides to take
1 minute.
in making this change. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Clerk, for an amendment.
Mr. President, Senator Erdman would offer floor amendment 207.
Senator Erdman, you are recognized to open on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. I spoke with Senator Conrad about this. I am in agreement that we shouldn't change the clock at all. We are in agreement on that. I want to bring your attention to the fact that if we did daylight savings time year-round, in December, when we have the shortest days of the year, the sunrise would be nearly 9 o'clock in Lincoln, Nebraska. So all of the children that attend school will be going to school in the dark. So I know that this probably won't receive the necessary support to move on, but I can tell you, Senator Conrad is exactly right. The majority of the people I have spoken with about this, they say just leave it one time or the other. But I can tell you that, speaking from experience, when the sun comes up at 8:30 in western Nebraska, and I have to do whatever I need to do outside before I go to town to do something else, it's in the dark. And so we will be, what shall I say, encouraged to support daylight savings time year-round by those who like to golf at 9 p.m. So my suggestion to those who like to have a lot of time after they get off work is start your business at 7 and close at 4. Why should the rest of us who don't golf or don't enjoy the evening playtime, or whatever you want to call it, have to suffer in the darkness for 5 months out of the year? The other issue that you'll realize when you read through 143, it not only changes to daylight savings time year-round, it also changes the date and when they start daylight savings time and when it ends. And that would be different than other states. So this is an opportunity for us to have a discussion about this. I'm not sure where the votes will land on this, but I can tell you that it's overwhelming the number of people who want to leave at the same time year-round. Arizona has chosen to stay the same time year-round. And whenever I call down there to talk to the people that I have worked with there, I have to figure out what time it is because they don't change. So we could adopt standard time year-round without approval of Congress. But when we do daylight savings time year-round, as Senator Conrad alluded to, we have to get approval from Congress, and who knows when that will come. So this is an opportunity for you to vote to keep your time the same year-round and help all those who have that fatigue and stress every time we change our clock. So I thought it was time for us to have a discussion about what we need to do here, and I would encourage you to adopt FA 207. Thank you.
Senator Dorn, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First off, I call it Senator Briese is not here anymore. This is one thing that he's dwelled on quite often while he was here, is this daylight savings time, or the discussion of the time. When I ran 6, 7, 8 years ago or whatever, this was one of the things that a lot of people talked about. This was one of the things that when I came up here, my wife said, you need to address that when you go up there. And I found out they've had bills for every year before I was even up here to address something with it, and it hasn't passed or gone on. Senator Briese and now Senator Conrad brought this forward. Part of the bill is that so many states have to pass it, or the federal government has to pass it to enact part of that. But one thing I do want to bring up, and then I'll ask Senator Conrad a question, and Senator Erdman brought it up, is this bill, though, would change the start date and the end date for daylight savings times. Under this bill, the start of daylight savings time would be moved from the first Sunday in April to the second Sunday in March. The end of daylight savings time would move from the last Sunday in October to the first Sunday in November. And would Senator Conrad yield a question?
Senator Conrad, will you yield?
Yes, of course.
So I just listed those dates there. That now will make us different than the rest of the country, or what does that, moving those dates, what will that, or how will that affect us with the rest of the states around us, the rest of the country?
Thank you so much, Senator Dorn. I couldn't agree with your wife more. This is one that we have to bring across the finish line. And, you know, this was part of the measure that I picked up from Senator Briese, who was very well known for his work on this. And my understanding in regards to that specific provision, and I'm very glad that you highlighted it on the committee statement, which does a great job of distilling these different issues. But you're right, the bill would, as it stands, and it remains to be seen whether or not Senator Erdman's amendment would be adopted, which I'm very, very open-minded to, would really do two things. One, it would flag that we are going to opt to permanent daylight savings time being contingent upon a federal law change and the adoption of that by 3 adjacent states. In the meantime, the part that would go into effect immediately if this measure were successful would be to adjust the end dates and the start dates for the current daylight savings time. So I think that was meant to provide some immediate action or softening of this current, more disruptive approach. I will go back and double check to see if those other 19 states that have moved in the other direction have made that similar kind of weekly change in regards to how they're looking at it. But I know in the research I've read, as these measures have come through Nebraska and on the federal level, most people agree they want to change. Most people have strong feelings about whether it's standard time or daylight savings time. There's been some discussion in good articles about maybe splitting the difference or adjusting the time frame. So everybody agrees we want to, pretty much everybody, 70% of people agree we want to change it or get on the same path together. There's always some devils in the details about how we go about it. But I'll triple check how our sister states do that, Senator Dorn, and I will get back to you on it or put it in the record.
Well, thank you very much for that. I will agree with you, agree with Senator Erdman. Most of the people I visit with or visit with me, they would like it to be one time, not have the change.
1 minute.
I know Senator Conrad talked about her young kids and how it affects them. Let me tell you, I don't know about, I call it the middle generation, but as you get older or you age, the people in my generation, it also affects us very much. And it's a challenge to overcome that. Sometimes it takes several days or weeks to, I call it, adjust your schedule and get back on the new time. So thank you very much.
Senator Dungan, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm just glad we're finally talking about the issues. Here with LB 143 and Floor Amendment 207, we have, I think, an issue that I legitimately see both sides of, and I'm really interested in this debate. I would agree with Senators Dorn, Conrad, Erdman, and pretty much everyone else who's spoken that I think switching the time back and forth is the problem. That's really, I think, what causes us a lot of grief, and it makes us all feel exhausted and tired. And the question is just which of these times makes the most sense. I can say personally, I absolutely hate leaving work and going home when it's 4:30 and dark outside. I see a lot of heads nodding yes, but it's also very hard to wake up in the morning when it's dark. So, you know, it's 6 one way, half a dozen the other. But if I had to pick, and the reason that I generally think I lean towards supporting LB 143 without the amendment is it's simply a lot harder to go home at the end of the night and do things when it's dark. That's more anecdotal, obviously, than some of the evidence that we've talked about already, but that's, I think, why I'm leaning that direction. But I understand it's a little bit more complicated than that. I was actually shocked at how many emails I got about this bill. Once it came up last year, Senator Briese introduced it, and there were 50 plus emails that I got about this on both sides of the issue. So, you know, all joking aside, I know it actually is very serious to a lot of people. So I did pull up just a couple of sort of the highlights of why adopting the permanent daylight saving time might be helpful, but also some of the cons, because I think it lends itself towards the debate. So one of the things that I thought was interesting is the U.S. Energy Department has actually shown that permanent daylight saving time can lower energy bills. By virtue of the fact that it's lighter later and we don't have to have our lights on as early, they've actually seen a huge decrease in energy costs. And so there's an actual cost savings to that. However, other studies that have been done have shown an increased risk of developing certain health issues with daylight saving time. And so, I would have to dig a little bit deeper into that. But there have been some health issues, I think, related to the mismatch of the circadian rhythm with the actual daylight that's seen. So that's a problem. One pro to permanent daylight savings time is an actual statistically significant reduction in crime. Both the Brookings Institute and the University of Washington Magazine have done studies and published studies that have shown increased daylight leads to a decrease in crime. So there's a community safety angle to this one as well that I think is interesting. There's more time spent outside. But a con is they've seen a lot of drop in workplace productivity. So I'm not going to go too deep into all of those right now. People can look those up, and I'm happy to talk to folks off the mic about them if they like. But I think there's a legitimate argument for both of these. Senator Erdman is correct that if we adopt permanent daylight savings time, there will be certain points in the year where it's incredibly dark late in the morning. But just picking one over the other, I would prefer that to it being dark at 4:30 when we leave the Capitol and go home. One last thing I would say, this is more a note for myself than anybody else. I constantly make this mistake, but I want to make clear for the record, as my roommate, Senator John Kavanaugh, pointed out to me when I misstated it, it's daylight saving time. It is not possessive, nor is it plural. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Fredrickson, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know what I'm going to do with this bill, to be completely frank with you. I'm rising today because I have a couple questions, and similar to Senator Dungan, I've actually received a number of emails on this, and I'm kind of surprised at how many emails I've received on this. I'm intrigued by Senator Erdman's amendment, actually, and I want to kind of get some clarity from him about a couple of things as well, if he's still around. But one question I do have is that the bill, so as Senator Conrad spoke in her introduction, this is all, if we pass this bill, this will not go into effect unless the federal government, one, gives permission for this, and two, I think there's another contingency. It would require, I think, 3 adjacent states to us. So 3 border states would also have to change this. So that provides a little bit more clarity on that issue in terms of this is not an immediate effect thing. But one question I do have, and I think Senator Conrad was going to look into this a little bit more, is that it says, in the meantime, this is a bill that would adjust the start of daylight savings time. So it would shift Nebraska's start of daylight savings time immediately. And so my question regarding that is that, will there be a time when we are an hour ahead or an hour behind everyone around us for a week or two, which I think is sort of kind of has the potential to be a little confusing for folks. So that's one question I had. And, if we're going to move forward with this, I don't know if there's an amendment to sort of strike that, if that's something that would be, folks would be open to. I just think it would be cumbersome to Nebraskans, especially, I represent a district in Omaha. We have a lot of folks who come in from Iowa, for example. If there's an hour difference in the 2 states, that can cause a little bit of confusion for a period of time. So that's one question I did have. I've learned, I started looking a little bit more into this, similar to Senator Dungan, and I've also learned that there's a lot of passion about this issue. I mean, some actually refer to daylight savings time as false time. I've also learned that standard time is sometimes referred to as natural time or God's time. And there are public health implications around this as well. But I wanted to ask, Senator Erdman, will you yield to a question about your amendment? Oh. If Senator Erdman will yield to a question.
Senator Erdman, will you yield to a question?
Yes, I would.
So I want to make sure I understood you correctly. Would your amendment would make it permanent daylight savings time or permanent standard time? What was that?
Permanent standard time year round.
Standard time year round. So it'd go the opposite direction of what the original bill is,
Correct.
But it would still allow for that
No
continuity.
changing of the clock. Standard time year round. So when the sun is right straight up in the middle of the sky, it's 12 o'clock.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. That's all I have. I will continue to listen to debate and see where I end up landing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Erdman, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I would assume the lawyers will agree with this. When you are losing on the policy discussion, you should discuss the facts. So here are the facts, okay? Doctors and scientists argue that standard time is actually better for your health. Our internal clock is better aligned with getting light in the morning which in turn sets us up for a better sleep cycle at night. That is the facts. So I don't know why it's so hard to understand the facts, but sometimes it doesn't make sense, and maybe that's because we don't want to listen to what they have to say. But I would think that these scientists and doctors maybe have researched this and understand the significance of making these time changes and what it does to our bodies. And so if we want to fix it, and we have the authority to fix it without approval from the federal government, it would just make sense to me that we go with standard time year-round. We wouldn't be the only one, because Arizona stays the same. I think Hawaii does as well. And I looked up the 19 states that have already adopted daylight savings time, and I'm surprised by some of those, and especially Montana. But this is an opportunity for us to do what the people want, is to fix their clock year-round. And so I would encourage you to listen to what these doctors and scientists said. They are the experts on this. And let's give people a chance to be healthy. Let's keep our clocks the same. Thank you.
Senator DeBoer, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm one of the 30%, I guess, that doesn't mind so much the changing of the time, but having seen the writing on the wall, now I'm engaged in whether it's better to be all the time on daylight savings time or, daylight saving time, or all of the time on standard time. My understanding is that sort of how time, we think of time now as such a essential thing that it just is, but of course, time is a social construct, and even the time zones that we have were created by the railroads, is my understanding. And so whether we're at 11:50 now, or 12:50 now, or 9:50, or whatever time we are, it's kind of constructed to begin with. So trying to figure out what the best time is a little difficult. So I'm trying to understand how the bill operates. So I wonder if Senator Conrad would yield to a question.
Senator Conrad, will you yield?
Yes, of course. And I apologize to Senator DeBoer. I was engaged in conversation. So if you pose the question, you may need to repose the question, please.
I haven't.
Okay.
I wanted to know, so it seems that there's two parts of the bill, is that correct?
Yeah,
one that
right.
says if is it all of our neighbors or most of our neighbors, or how many other states around us have to adopt it for the year-round time to be in effect?
Yep. So for that component, that it really works like this. So if LB 143 were to move forward as Senator Briese initially proposed it, it would follow this framework under federal law for how we can go about effectuating this change. And it would require Nebraska to signal our support for making this change by passing LB 143. And then the changes would not be impactful, would not be realized or recognized by Nebraskans until two other things happen. One, 3 adjacent states must also signal their support to move therein through legislative resolution or legislative bill. Currently, Colorado and Wyoming have already done that. So we would still need one more adjacent state to move in that direction. And I understand that measures are moving through other adjacent neighboring states. Additionally, as Senator Erdman correctly noted, it would then also require federal approval. So there's really two contingencies in the approach that LB 143 utilizes. Action in 3 adjacent states, 2 have already acted, so we need one more to go, and movement on the federal level.
So I mean, I know other states have done different things than everybody else on daylight savings. What is the likelihood that the feds approve if we and some other states wanted to change our time?
Yeah, that's a good question, Senator DeBoer. I think it would probably be hard to quantify what the odds might be for congressional action, but some things that I think perhaps might be instructive in that regard. One, you have seen a measure, I think it was championed by Senator Marco Rubio, to make daylight savings time permanent and entitled the Sunshine Protection Act, which was successful in the Senate in very recent years, and then a companion bill languished in the House, so there was no action. But you know how
1 minute.
mired our federal lawmaking bodies are in partisan dysfunction and disagreement. So the fact that that did move through the Senate is a good sign, is a welcome sign. And I think when more and more states move in that direction, it will provide more impetus for both the House and the Senate to act in this regard. So I couldn't put it into betting odds about whether or not the Congress will act, but it does seem, really there's just a tidal wave of movement within the states to address this, with 19 states going in that direction in about the last 5 years.
Okay, and then there's another aspect of the bill that
That's right.
before any of that went into place, that then they would change the dates. Is that right?
Yes, you're right. And Senator Dorn asked about this, and I appreciate the opportunity because others have asked about this off the mic, and I fear that I've muddied
Time,
the waters.